Donald Trump has chosen a side in this new world order, aligning the United States with Russia and turning its back on traditional European allies, choosing to side with the bad guys and make America the enemy of the world.
The pressure on Ukraine is among the heaviest it has ever been. Ukraine may soon face a very difficult choice, either the loss of dignity or the risk of losing a key partner, either a complex set of 28 points or an extremely difficult winter, the hardest one yet, followed by further risks, a life without freedom, without dignity, without justice.
The diplomatic storm surrounding the war in Ukraine has culminated in an extraordinary and disruptive action by the United States, a high-pressure, unilateral push to force a deal that overwhelmingly favors Russia. This move represents a stark reversal of U.S. policy, signaling a definitive plot by Donald Trump to placate Vladimir Putin and secure an expedient end to the conflict, regardless of the consequences for Kiev or the integrity of the Western alliance. The framework for this abrupt shift was delivered with blunt force. U.S. Army Secretary Dan Driscoll, a key figure recently placed in charge of the Ukraine portfolio, convened a meeting with NATO ambassadors in Kiev late on Friday to issue a clear, non-negotiable directive. This meeting followed direct talks with President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and a phone call from the White House underscoring the high-level coordination of the ultimatum.
If Kyiv does not want to discuss President Trump's proposals and refuses to do so, then both they and the European warmongers must understand that the events that took place in Kupiansk will inevitably be repeated in other key areas on the front line.
According to reports from the meeting, the US expects Ukrainian President Zelenskyy to accept a peace agreement with Russia in the coming days. The pressure applied to Kiev is immense. Take the deal now, or face the certainty of a much worse deal in future. As U.S. Charge d'Affaires Julie Davis warned the diplomats, the deal does not get better from here, it gets worse. Driscoll, echoing the White House's impatience, told allies, no deal is perfect, but it must be done sooner rather than later. This urgency is not motivated by strategic necessity, but by a political timeline. Donald Trump reportedly desires an agreement by the upcoming Thanksgiving holiday. This domestic deadline is driving an aggressive timeline, as Davis noted, that subordinates the complex security and territorial demands of the conflict to the U.S. administration's need for a rapid diplomatic headline. The mood in the room was described as somber and deeply troubled. Several European ambassadors questioned both the content of the deal and the manner in which the US had conducted negotiations with Russia without keeping its traditional allies informed. One source characterized the meeting as a nightmare, where US officials repeated the cynical argument that Ukraine has no cards to play, a narrative that minimizes Kiev's defense and justifies unilateral retreat, echoing Trump's contentious statements from earlier in the year. The true nature of Washington's pivot is laid bare in the provisions of the draft agreement. The document is not a proposal for a fair peace, but a clear set of concessions designed to satisfy Moscow's core demands, effectively rewarding Russian aggression and allowing the Kremlin to consolidate its gains. Crucially, the plan was reportedly drafted not through multilateral consultation, but via a dedicated back channel involving Trump aide Steve Witkoff and Kremlin advisor Kirill Dmitriev. This direct, covert negotiation between Washington and Moscow, bypassing Kiev and NATO partners entirely, underscores the U.S. authoritarian regime's prioritization of appeasing Vladimir Putin over maintaining Allied solidarity. As Driscoll dismissively stated when defending the exclusion of allies, arguing that the process was kept manageable, President Trump wants peace now. The more cooks in the kitchen, the harder it is to handle. The demands placed on Ukraine are devastating. Kiev must formalize the handover of territory currently occupied by Russia, particularly in the eastern Donbass region, and even more egregiously, cede additional territory still under Ukrainian control. When asked why Kiev should be forced to give up sovereign territory Russian troops had failed to capture for 11 years, a US official simply claimed the deal was beneficial to Ukraine. The deal includes a provision for an amnesty for all war crimes committed during the conflict, granting impunity to Russian forces and signalling a disregard for international justice. Additionally, Ukraine must accept binding limits on the size and capability of its military, and Kiev must formally relinquish its ambition to join NATO, removing a key Western security anchor and fulfilling one of Russia's primary strategic objectives. Russian President Vladimir Putin immediately confirmed his knowledge of the plan, stating yesterday that Moscow had received a copy, and he believed it can be used as the basis for a final peaceful settlement.
I believe the text can be used as the basis for a final peace settlement, but it has not been discussed with us in detail, and I can guess why. The US government has so far failed to secure Ukraine's consent. Ukraine is against it.
This endorsement is the clearest sign that the US-drafted agreement reflects a near-total acceptance of Russia's terms. Although Trump later claimed the plan was not his final offer, he was clear that one way or the other, he hoped the fighting would stop, emphasizing expediency over justice. The aggressive imposition of this Russia-centric deal has left traditional US allies reeling. The fact that other Ukraine allies were blindsided and kept in the dark over the content and format of the plan generated acute concern across Europe that Russia had too much say in negotiating what was being presented to Ukrainians as a done deal. European leaders, including those of Britain, France, Germany, Italy and the EU, met on the sidelines of the G20 summit, which Donald Trump pointedly boycotted, to formulate a collective response. Their joint statement was a unified expression of alarm and a subtle rebuke of the US strategy. While acknowledging that the draft had important elements, they firmly declared that it will require additional work and reiterated that borders must not be changed by force. They also asserted that any elements relating to the EU and NATO would require their direct agreement, asserting their stake in the peace process the US attempted to control. The British Prime Minister Keir Starmer voiced a critical concern held by the Allies, specifically regarding the US proposals to cap Ukraine's military. He said this was troubling because it's fundamental that Ukraine has to be able to defend itself if there's a ceasefire. French President Emmanuel Macron also publicly called into question the efficacy of the G20, specifically pointing to the US unilateral peace plan and reiterating that there can be no peace in Ukraine without Ukrainians, without respect for their sovereignty. The holidays are quickly approaching, and that always makes me think about my favourite traditions. For my family, it's making my grandmother's famous crescent rolls. It's a tradition that goes back to the 1940s, and thankfully I have tons of old, slightly yellowed photos of her and my mum baking them together. But what if you could give a gift that brings your favourite holiday traditions and memories to life every day? With an Aura frame, you can. Aura is the smart digital frame that lets you see those treasured photos and videos instantly streamed from your phone, so the joy of the holidays never fades. I have an Aura frame myself, and I can tell you it really makes the perfect gift. The app is incredibly simple to use, and you get unlimited free photos and video. Just connect to Wi-Fi once, and you're set for life. I even preloaded mine with a whole album of those old baking photos before it shipped to my parents. They absolutely loved seeing those memories instantly pop up. You can't wrap togetherness, but you can frame it. This year, make your gift truly meaningful. The earlier you order, the more time you have to curate your gift and add a special message. Plus, every frame comes beautifully packaged in a premium gift box with no price tag. For a limited time, visit auraframes.com and get $45 off Aura's best-selling Carver matte frames, named #1 by Wirecutter, by using promo code 5MIN at checkout. That's AURA frames.com, promo code 5MIN. This exclusive Black Friday Cyber Monday deal is their best of the year, so order now before it ends. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. This unprecedented move by the US to negotiate a settlement directly with Russia, one that compromises core Western principles on sovereignty and territorial integrity, has fractured the anti-war coalition. It has forced Ukraine into a desperate corner, facing a painful choice, as Zelenskyy himself stated, between losing our dignity and losing a key ally. By using the threat of abandonment to secure sweeping concessions from Moscow, the Trump regime has effectively aligned its immediate diplomatic goals with Putin's long-term strategic interests, prioritizing a quick exit over the principles of justice and international law. This unprecedented and aggressive pivot on Ukraine is reflective of a wider trend in the U.S. regime's foreign policy, a deliberate choice to align with authoritarian regimes and dictatorships, often at the expense of traditional democratic alliances. By unilaterally dictating a peace that ratifies territorial conquest and grants impunity for war crimes, Donald Trump has signaled to the world's autocrats, from Moscow, Saudi Arabia, and Syria, that the United States is willing to abandon democratic partners and foundational international principles for immediate, politically convenient deals. This strategy of appeasement and isolationism not only jeopardizes Ukraine's sovereignty, but actively weakens the global democratic front, encouraging future acts of aggression and fundamentally altering the post-war international order in favor of those who seek to undermine it, especially if there is a financial incentive for the American president and his personal business interests. I'm Anthony Davis. You can find me on the 5 Minute News YouTube channel and podcast, on Wednesdays co-hosting Uncovered, and on Sunday on The Weekend Show with Midas Touch.